like everybody wants to know, am I going to make money in this field, you know? Hi guys, and welcome to I Root for Nature, where we talk about all things law with a particular focus on environmental law, environmental justice, climate justice, and other social justice issues. And sometimes we do talk about travel and nature escapes just to keep the sanity rolling. But welcome if you're new here, and if you're a returning subscriber, welcome, and it's very good to have you here. So every single time that I tell people that I'm an environmental lawyer, I always get questions like, what is environmental law? So what do you do exactly? What's a typical day like for you? I've also received some questions from some of you guys asking me about the practical aspects of the field, like what do employers look at when they're recruiting, or how do you get into the environmental law sector as a law graduate. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be doing a Q&A, just answering some general environmental law questions that I received from some people and some that are commonly asked. And then thereafter, I'm actually going to do a separate video where I'm going to be discussing how you actually get into the environmental law sector, especially as a law graduate. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I don't want to mix up that information with everything else that I'm going to be talking about today. I think that is very important and it deserves a separate video of its own. So it will definitely be the next video after this one. So please be on the lookout for it. To begin, the very first question is, what is environmental law? I'm just going to answer this with a dictionary definition because I don't want to give a long answer to it. But environmental law is basically laws, policies, or principles which seek to regulate environmental management. For example, pollution control laws, land use laws, conservation or water laws. All these subjects, they fall under environmental law. Second question is, what is the main purpose of environmental law? The main purpose of environmental law is basically to regulate any activity or decision that has an actual or potential impact on the environment. It is to ensure equitable access to natural resources for both those who are living right now and those that are yet to be born, which ties into one of the key principles of environmental law, which is to ensure sustainable development, which is basically development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of future generations. So it's about doing everything with a balance. Whatever you're going to be doing, whatever activities you're going to be getting involved in, make sure that there is a balance, that it's sustainable and it's not going to lead to irreversible environmental harm. What are some of the key principles of environmental law? Now this feels like an environmental law 101 class, but please bear with me, it's not a lot. But one of the key principles of environmental law is the polluter pays principle. This principle is basically any person who is involved in any polluting activity should be responsible for the cost of preventing or dealing with any pollution that is caused by that activity. Instead of passing it on to somebody else, that person is responsible for it. So this includes the cost of preventing the pollution and the cost of dealing with the consequences of pollution that is already being caused. It encompasses also costs to human beings and costs to the environment itself. So that is one of the key principles of environmental law. The second principle is the precautionary principle. This is basically about taking precaution in anything that you're going to do, any decision you're going to make, or any activity that you intend to undertake. So it's about the application of preventative measures in situations of scientific uncertainty where a course of action may cause harm to the environment. So simply put, it's basically, if you don't know what the environmental impact of a particular activity is going to be, rather take precaution and not do it. So that's where the preventative part comes in. So until you're sure, until you know, then you can go ahead and do whatever you intend to do, or just not do it if the harm is going to be irreversible. So This principle is grounded in the fact that harm to the environment can be irreversible. So therefore, it's better to avoid any possible harm than to try and remedy it later, especially in situations where you don't actually know what the harm is going to be or the extent of that harm. The other one, which is also very important, is the duty of care to avoid environmental harm. This principle basically imposes a duty on every entity to act with due care to avoid damage to others or to the environment, or where it cannot be completely avoided, to be mitigated or remedied. So it's very closely linked to the polluter pays principle, if you recall what I said earlier. And the last principle that I'm going to talk about, like there's so many principles when it comes to environmental law and environmental regulation, but I'm just going to talk about this principle of sustainable development. And like I said earlier, it basically refers to development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This means that sustainable development is development that does not result in irreversible harm to the environment. This kind of development should balance social, economic, and environmental concerns. No one factor should outweigh the other. Everything is intertwined and there should be a balance, between all of those factors. So when you're making a decision, or if you're trying to embark on an activity that has the potential to harm the environment, you need to balance those three factors together. You can't just think about the money, or you can't just think about the social needs, or you can't just think about environmental concerns only. Everything has to be balanced before you make that decision to proceed. The other question was, why do we need to protect the environment? This is a very important question, and I think I'm actually going to do a separate video on this with more detailed information around this question, because I don't think I can do justice in it in this particular Q&A. But basically, I think you've already had people talking about there's no life on a dead planet, and that is essentially why we need to be protecting the environment, because human lives are strongly dependent on the health of the environment. The quality of the environment affects us all. For example, poor air quality due to air pollution has a detrimental effect on people's health. So therefore, protecting the environment in that case would be protecting humanity. And that is one key reason why you need to protect the environment. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave it here. And please be on the lookout for the other video that I'm going to be making, where I'm going to be talking about why we need to protect the environment as human beings. And then the other question that I got was, what is an environmental lawyer? And I actually have to answer since this video is about environmental law, and the answer is simple and straightforward. An environmental lawyer is basically a lawyer who uses the law to apply it to environmental issues and concerns. It's as simple as that. How does one become an environmental lawyer? Simple. The process is basically the same as that of becoming an attorney in South Africa, and I think almost everywhere else. There's no special process for environmental lawyers. So first things first, you obviously need to pass your matric and get into law school. And during law school, it's strongly advisable for you to take the environmental law elective. And if you do a master's in environmental law, that's even better. The reason why this is important is because it adds to your knowledge of the field and you become more competitive in terms of entering the field. And then the other thing that you have to do is your practical vocational training, which was previously known as articles of clerkship. And this is someone that anybody who wants to become an attorney in South Africa has to go through. This is done for 2 years, and it will be so great for you to do it at an environmental law firm, because then you're introduced to the issues much earlier on and trained around it. And then you also have to write your board exams and do your practical legal training for about 6 months if you're doing it full-time, or you can also do it part-time, and that depends on how you want to do it. And lastly, you have to get admitted by the High Court of South Africa to become a practicing attorney. And then from then you can then choose to specialize in the field of environmental law, and that's as simple as that. You are now an environmental lawyer. What type of work do environmental lawyers do? I always get this question a lot. Like a lot of people say to me, what's a typical day for you, Tatiana? What's a typical day for an environmental lawyer? And first things first, I think it's very important for you to remember that environmental law is the application of law to environmental issues. So as environmental lawyers, we can use the law of delete, we can use criminal law, administrative law, or procedural law on matters that affect the environment. For example, the bulk of the work that I'm doing right now is about appealing and reviewing certain decisions that were made by the state that have a detrimental impact on the environment. So I'm going to be looking at administrative law, civil procedure to determine the rules that I need to follow to bring a case and how best to bring a case. On this note, it is very important to note that there are different types of environmental lawyers. So the type of work we do depends on which type of environmental lawyer you are. The first type is environmental lawyers who act in the public interest. This mostly consists of activist lawyers who represent mostly poor communities and act in the public interest where environmental issues are concerned. So this is basically the work that I do almost every day of my life. And some of the work that this public interest environmental lawyers do is litigation in the public interest on behalf of communities on various issues concerning the environment, such as air, water, climate change, lack of public participation in decision-making processes, and legal advice on environmental issues or concerns. So communities can approach you and say, we have this issue, how do we proceed? What are we supposed to do as a community? Are we supposed to litigate? Are we supposed to engage with the perpetrators? What exactly are we supposed to do? So you then give them legal advice on that. We also do some advocacy work on environmental concerns. And advocacy is basically finding other ways to ensure that people's rights are enforced and certain environmental concerns are addressed without going to court. So, by the way, advocacy can work hand in hand with litigation, as it is another tool or strategy that can help with a case to raise awareness about the issues or to help people stand up for their rights. Examples of advocacy include conducting workshops, approaching the media to raise awareness, or just formulating campaigns on a particular issue. So for example, if you've been following the news, you'd know about the Deadly Air campaign, which is basically about air pollution in the Mpumalanga region that is killing people and is detrimental to the health of adults and children. And there's actually a case that is pending in the High Court with regards to that matter. So that is a perfect example of how advocacy and litigation can also work together. Other things that you do is research. The field is fast growing and evolving, so you constantly need to do some research on certain aspects. Research can also be for the purposes of compiling a report dealing with a particular environmental issue, such as water or the level of compliance with environmental laws by certain corporate entities. Apart from environmental law specific issues, research is also just a critical component of legal work. I think any lawyer can tell you that they do research sometimes. The other important aspect is law reform. This is where you make contributions to the drafting of laws, policies, or guidelines that affect the environment. And sometimes you actually attend Parliament for briefing or submit comments or present those comments to Parliament on certain environmental legislation or other issues concerning the environment. And this will help in the contribution of changing laws and systems. The other aspect is community engagement. Community members are mostly going to be your clients, so you need to constantly engage with them. So your work may involve traveling to those communities for consultations or site visits to see what's actually bothering them, what the environmental concern is, or what the issue is while you're on the ground. And it can also involve training those communities, that is, empowering them with tools and legal knowledge on how to enforce their rights. So the other type of environmental lawyer are obviously those that work with corporate firms. So if you're a corporate environmental lawyer, chances are your work is going to be around performing environmental due diligence on mergers and acquisitions, environmental audits, and compliance assessments for industrial clients. And you'll also be defending or representing corporates whose activities have an impact on the environment. Another question that I got was, what kind of a person do I need to be to enter the environmental law field? The first thing I'm going to say is you need to be a problem solver. There's a whole range of problems. You just need to be someone who's a problem solver. You need to be a team player. A lot of work is done in teams, and your team may consist of people who are not even lawyers, such as scientists or grassroots activists. So you need to be able to work well with others, communicate well with others, and realize that it's not just about you, but there's a whole lot of you. So you need to be someone who's able to work well with others, someone who is a team player, someone who just doesn't think about themselves, but someone who actually contributes something to the team, and also realize that not everybody is a lawyer. So communicate in a way that everybody else will understand, and do your work, do your part, play your part. And critical analysis is very important. The environmental law field is very complex, and it's very important for you to think critically and analyze situations before you just go for it. Good listening skills and patience. You need to listen to your clients. You need to be very patient with your clients. Also, remember, you're also dealing with government and corporates, and sometimes they can really work on your patience. So patience is a virtue in environmental law. Well-developed sense of fairness and justice, and you need to be able to handle stress and pressure. I think I've already explained this a bit. There's a lot of work, and it can become very stressful sometimes. So you need to be someone who's able to handle stress and pressure. Most importantly, you need to be able to explain difficult legal terms in simple terms. I think I've always been saying this. It's very important for you to explain legal jargon in simple terms. The environmental law field is a very technical field, so you need to be able to tone down your language so that other people can understand what you're talking about, and they're actually able to engage with you or the issues that you're trying to bring to the table. And lastly, you need to be able to handle a large amount of facts and see facts in large bodies of evidence. There's a lot of paper, especially during litigation. So you need to be someone who loves to read. You need to have a sharp eye for detail. And you need to be someone who's actually just able to handle that large amount of paper, because it's going to be a lot, and most of it is going to be very technical. So you need to be someone who's able to actually comprehend quite a lot of things. Obviously, you're not going to be doing all the technical stuff yourself. That's why we hire experts to sort of digest that information for us and explain it to us. So you're always going to get help, but you also need to be able to be open to that. You need to be able to be open to the fact that's going to happen, expect it. And then the other question that I received was, do law firms look at the subjects that I did in high school, such as physical science or life sciences, or they only consider what I learned in university? The simple answer to this is no. Like any other job, if you're applying for an entry-level job, they're obviously going to ask you to submit your matric certificate. However, the subjects that you did back then do not influence their decision on whether or not you're going to get the job. Those subjects may be relevant maybe when you're trying to get into varsity, of which, by the way, if you're trying to get into law school, they mostly look at English and maths, and then any other subject is just an added advantage. So you don't necessarily need the subjects to become an environmental lawyer. What you need is your law degree. And like I said earlier, studying environmental law in varsity will be an added advantage, because it's easier to employ someone who has some knowledge or background of the field and is passionate about it than someone who doesn't really know anything and starting to train them from scratch. I mean, obviously they can still employ you if that's the case, but I'm just saying, actually, knowledge of environmental law while you're still studying your LLB can be very advantageous for you. However, for more information on this, be on the lookout for my next video, where I'm going to be talking about how to get into the environmental law sector and the type of things that employers look for when they are recruiting. Last question, how much does an environmental lawyer earn in South Africa? I'm like, bottom line, everybody wants to know, am I going to make money in this field, But I'm not going to give you an exact answer, because the salary depends on who you're working for and also your level of experience. experience. So you can earn anything from like 20,000 Rand a month to 98,000 Rand a month or beyond, depending on your grade and where you are working. I would advise people not to get into this area of work for the money. Of course, money is very important because at the end of the day, you want to get rewarded for all your hard work, and we all have needs, okay? We have needs that need to be catered for, and we need money for that. However, if you're going to do this kind of work, especially if you're going to be a public interest environmental lawyer, you need a much deeper motivation to get into this field, because the work is going to be very stressful. Remember, you're dealing with government, you're dealing with corporates, and it can become very strenuous at times. So you need something that drives you every single day, something that makes you want to wake up every single day to just go and do that job apart from the money. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't watched it yet, please do go and watch my other video on my channel where I talk about why I became an environmental lawyer, to put some things that I was talking about here into perspective.